Welcome to the G-Force podcast. My name is Britnie Turner. Our mission for this podcast is to help each person learn how to become a powerful force for good in the world. On this show, I interview some of the greatest minds in the space so we can extract what it takes to level up our income and our impact in our one chance on earth. Well, welcome to another G-Force podcast. Today I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Rob Touchstone, the writer of the vision and the co-founder of the Well Coffeehouse, which is an amazing social enterprise that turns profits into hope for those in need in the form of clean water. Rob and his co-founder were named Nashville's Business Innovator of the Year in 2016. And he not only has founded this incredible organization, but he's also the creator and director of Lipscomb University's Center for Business as Mission, where he teaches and mentors students to think missionally about business and entrepreneurship. This man is right up the alley of every single thing that we stand for as G-Force. He's living it, he's finding new ways, and he's teaching the dang classes that we wish we could have had in college. Of course, I didn't go to college, but this is why, because they didn't have this class. So welcome to the G-Force podcast, Rob.
Thank you, Britnie. It is so good to see you and to join you in this conversation.
Excited to have you. And for those who don't know exactly what the Well Coffeehouse is and what your mission is, can you please explain that? Because it's an absolutely beautiful organization that I'm obsessed with.
Well, thank you so much. Well, let me first say, too, I did go to college, but I did not get a business degree. These are the kind of classes that I wish that we could have all taken when we were trying to figure this out. But the Well is a social enterprise that loves coffee first and foremost. We want to make a wonderful cup of coffee. We want to serve you because you choose to buy what we think is a great product. But in the meantime, we want you to know that that product is going to make a difference. So we think that transaction through a cup of coffee can lead to transformation. And here's how. So we take the profit on the sales and we give it to fund clean water wells. So every time you buy from us, you're not only getting a great product, but you're also helping fund a water well in the developing world. And so that's what we're all about. We also see ourselves as community builders. So we are building space for people to come and be served and be loved. And so we're not just building wells, we're building community in the form of our stores as we connect with our customers and bring people together for a lot of different reasons. So that's generally what we do.
I love that. And there's so many different needs and there's so many different causes out there in the world. What made you put on your entrepreneur hat and decide to help solve this issue? And why did you pick that issue?
Well, it goes back a little way. So I mentioned that I didn't have a business degree. I didn't take business classes. I got a degree in Bible way back in the day, and youth ministry was the focus. So I spent 16 years of my career as a youth minister. And part of the way that the Wells vision came to be actually came out of some of my church pain. And so I'll have to explain that a little bit because I've just sort of teased that out, but let me explain how church pain led to hopefully great coffee. While I was working for the church, I guess I started to realize that a lot of the way that we seek to live on mission was to get people to come into our church buildings. And I always realized when people came in, they came with their church face on, or they didn't feel like maybe they could truly be themselves. And so even when I would meet with people in my church office, it was almost like they couldn't say certain things. They might slip up and say a bad word, and then they would say, oh, God might strike me down in this space. So I decided to get out of the church building and start having all my meetings at the Starbucks down the road. And I was like, I'm just going to meet with people outside the office, church office, and just see what happens. So for about a year, I did almost all my meetings and Bible studies down the street. And people were so much more relaxed and real. And then I started meeting people who I wouldn't have met otherwise. And so I just started to realize the value of hanging out in more public spaces in the marketplace outside of the walls of the church building. And I started to think, what if we could create our own kind of space? And I didn't know that much about coffee. I really was not an expert in it. Still am not an expert in it. Have some great people that are. But what if we could create space to truly love and serve people? So the first and foremost, I guess, goal of the well was to create space. I wanted to create a space outside the church building
Oh,
to meet people who may never come into our church building. So it's kind of a barrier breaker. And I wanted to love and serve people through a business model that would lead with a great product. And as I was thinking through like just the space creation, then it started to dawn on me, wait a minute, we could actually use the business model to generate profit that could then address a cause. And it was right around that time that I was at a conference and heard the speaker say something about the water crisis that I don't think I'd ever heard before. I mean, I knew there were water crises, but I'd never heard the statistic that 6,000 people were dying from waterborne illness every single, and I thought he was going to say month or year, but he said every single day.
no.
And 780 million people don't have access to clean water. That 6,000 a day statistic, for whatever reason, you know how, I mean, different things sort of get our attention, and two people could watch the same movie and one person could say, yeah, that was okay. Another person like, oh, it just wrecked me. Well, that statistic wrecked me. And I can't explain why, because I had not been to a place up close where I had actually seen the water crisis. I've been to different places in the world, but it just struck me so clearly. I believe it was God's way of speaking to me. And I realized this is the thing that we're supposed to give to. And
Wow.
so just to put it, I guess, succinctly, we wanted to create space to love people toward Jesus, kind of like the story of the woman at the well in the Bible, who had everything maybe going against her, and Jesus just shattered all the barriers and met her where she was at a well. And we wanted to use the business model to fund water wells. So that's why we named it The Well. Create space to love people toward Jesus, and then create profit that would use a business model to literally fund water wells. And so I guess you could say it came out of my church pain because of my realization that the church was kind of limited in what it could do in just inviting people to come to church. And just a little bit more of that story. I was actually fired by the first church that I worked for. And that was extremely painful for me because I was pushed out, not because of something like I'd done immoral or something like that, but I had just been a little too inclusive and embracing, and the people that I was trying to reach out to and to create space for, the church just kind of pulled one of those, hey, we're going in a different direction kind of things. And I realized like how hard that was to be an outsider to the very church that had even been working for. So I started to really identify with the marginalized and the outsider. And so I developed a heart for that. And I wanted to love people that might not ever walk into a church building. So all that was to say that my desire was to create space and then to create a solution to some form of poverty. And the thing that God put on my heart was clean water. And so that's what the well does, is seek to address people that are thirsty for community and maybe thirsty for life-giving physical water.
I love that. So you've got this amazing holy intention. So that means you've probably had a really easy journey and you've had no road bumps and you've had no challenges in your career of launching this?
Well, I've always said I had no business starting a business. So first of all, I had no experience, no capital, and very little expertise in the field. So the deck was stacked against us from the beginning. But we built a team and surrounded ourselves with people that were good at all the things that were needed to open a coffee house. And it may sound a little bit kind of cheesy, but our secret weapon was prayer. I mean, we just started praying boldly for God to provide. I like to say for God to give the provision to the vision. So we had this vision for a coffee house, had no idea how to do it without God. And so we just said, God, provide, if you're willing, give us the provision. And so I was reading this book called The Circle Maker and by Mark Batterson, and he talked about praying circles around your vision. And so I went over to this old Burger King building in Green Hills and literally started walking prayer circles around it, saying, God, I want you to use this building to open our first store. And so I got down on my knees and drew a chalk circle around that building and walked around it again and again. And for any of you that are listening and want to read more about the circle maker, I'll just give you a little teaser. This is all about a Jewish rabbi in the first century who, during a drought, prayed himself into a circle, and he basically prayed. He said, God, I will not leave this circle until you send the rain. And it sounds so bold and so demanding. And in the story, according to the legend of Konai the circle maker, the rain started to fall really, really heavily. And it was like a rain that was like threatening, like it was going to flood the land. And Konai stayed in the circle and said, God, not for this kind of rain have I prayed, but for a rain that would save us. And so the rain turned to a light, very light downpour, exactly the opposite. And Konai said, no, God, not for this kind of rain have I prayed, but a rain that will sustain us. And the rain turned to a steady but life-giving rain. And, you hear that and you have to ask yourself, like, is it okay to talk to God that way and be that bold? But we started reading more carefully about Jesus saying, ask and seek and knock, and telling parables of widows who went before a judge and wore them out with a request. And so we prayed boldly, prayed circles around that first store. And I heard God say, I'm not going to drop a check out of the sky. You've got to go ask somebody for this. And so we went and asked our first donor to consider donating $30,000 toward the startup capital needs. And on World Water Day of 2012, the year we opened, and this person had no idea it was that, they called and said, I want to give you the $30,000 that you asked for. And we went the next day and signed the lease and started the process of opening the first store.
That's amazing. What do you do when you do face challenges? How do you, you've got a holy intention. There's actually 3 things that I know you address. One, it's creating this space for people to be loved in and come change and grow into being their best selves. Number 2, I know you employ college students too and give them this entrepreneurship experience. And number 3, you're using the profits from your product to fund these water solutions, which is literally saving lives. I can't even imagine how many lives you've already saved. With those 3 things, I'm sure there are still challenges, such as things like COVID or whatever. How do you deal with them? What's your process that our listeners can start doing themselves, besides praying?
Well, obviously praying is crucial, but I think God works in many different ways. And so when we pray, we have to also listen to what is the actual problem. And I think sometimes we are too quick to try to solve something without listening to what the actual problem is. So when we encounter things, we really try to go back to our entrepreneur roots. Entrepreneurs are really good problem solvers. In the beginning, we're inherently good problem solvers because we have to be. I mean, we go into it trying to kind of crack the code on how to run a sustainable or start a sustainable business. And so as an example, when COVID hit, we had to put our entrepreneurial hats back on. I mean, we're 8 years into this, but I really challenged our team to start thinking like entrepreneurs again. And I think you always have to think like an entrepreneur. You always have to think like a problem solver. And so we started to think, okay, our challenge right now is, how can you be a social enterprise in a business that's really dependent on social interaction, right? Coffee is a very social product in the midst of social distancing. And so it's like, this is a problem that could put us out of business. I mean, we looked that right in the eye and just thought this could be the end of the journey, of the dream. But being entrepreneurial, we said, how do we get good at things that we weren't good at before? And so we learned to think entrepreneurially again about what we were doing. And so we started to try to be problem solvers. How do we deliver coffee in a way that we've never delivered it before? How do we create value in a new way where you can't have people enjoying your product sitting down face to face? And so to me, the way you go about that in business is you've got to always think entrepreneurially. And for us, that meant problem solving in many different ways, listening to what customers really want, how they will still engage with your product. We discovered that people would still come and buy coffee from us. We just had to change the method, right? We had to change the channels that we were delivering it to them. And so that was challenging, but also kind of fun because we acquired some skills that we were not so good at maybe before. And so I'd say added a strength in our revenue streams because we're much better now at curbside and delivery than we ever were before COVID.
I love it. There's always some seed of equal or greater opportunity in every obstacle. I was sitting with somebody earlier today that's just having a rough time. And I said, all right, give me your list of all the horrible things happening in your life. Every single one. And we wrote down divorce, pain, something going wrong in the family. Like there's a whole list, financial, blah, blah, blah. And I made this person draw a line from the bad thing over to the good side. So we had a bad column. We put it in quotes because we said, we're labeling this as bad. Now we've got a good thing. What all the good things happening in your life? Even we're going to start with just the list of things that are on the left side. What's the good thing happening about the thing you're calling bad? And there wasn't one thing we couldn't come up with. It was hard with back pain. That was a hard one. But other than that, it was really interesting when you take a different look and have a different filter of how you look at things. Okay, if the way in which I did an exercise with a whole crew of entrepreneurs right after Hurricane Irma destroyed their entire country, like destroyed, like no buildings standing, barely. It's like a wall. And all of them lost all their businesses. And I said, I want you to write down the top 3 things of why this will be the greatest thing to ever happen to your business. And it was so cool to see that they said, we get to be, similar to what you're saying, we're going to get to be so good at these other ways that we provide service now that when normal business comes back, we're going to have double. And it's so cool to see how people just refiltered, perspective, got rid of the anxiety and said, there's always a way. And I now have this and this, which is so cool. So I love that you guys are doing that. And I'm just inspired. How long did it take you guys to kind of recognize and deal with that flow?
Well, I think there was about a month that we all, like I said, looked the end in the eye, and just, there's something very healthy about that though. It's probably because I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, but like, I sort of romanticize that. Like, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's dark and that's sad and we're going to push through it. There's almost something I think very healthy about looking the end right in the eye, staring sort of the end in the face and going, yeah, what if that happened? Like, my identity's not fully in this. I could deal with that, but that's not what's going to happen right here. We believe that God's not finished with this story. So for me, I think there's something very healthy about not just being overly just optimistic that it's just all going to work out, but actually entering into the crisis, almost like embracing it with everything that you have and saying, this is going to be hard, and this is going to be the hardest thing we've ever done. But let's just look it in the eye and figure out, again, how to be problem solvers. So I would say for about a month, we stared it in the face and realized, like, this could be the end of the vision, but we're going to do everything within us to push hard. So for about a month, we did a lot of listening to customers, to experts and others, to just try to figure out how do you survive. And then we just started pushing through. And, I think that's what good entrepreneurs have to do. There has to be persistence. There has to be boldness. And I think sometimes we say, it's kind of funny, like you see the hashtag, like the struggle is real. But I actually think it's funny because, anything that's real had to go through struggle. I mean, it's like the real is struggle, is the way we should say it, is that anything that's ever going to become reality has to endure struggle first. And so we shouldn't be that surprised when we start to iterate in what we're doing, that it's going to be continuously challenging. And like you said, that might be the best thing for us. So we have to embrace it. And I'm always up for a challenge. I mean, I don't ever want to have to face the one like we've just faced. I mean, with COVID. But I think those struggles can be really good for us and refine us in a way that causes us to reimagine things. It helps us to, I think, get rid of things that we don't need. I know even for me personally, this whole season has caused me to really rethink, like, just the stuff that I have. Like, what do I have? Do I really need this? I mean, when you don't wear your dress up clothes for like 5 months, you're kind of like, why do I have these clothes in my closet? I mean, I did a massive kind of a silly thing, but I cleaned out a lot of stuff that, I realized I don't need all this stuff. I would, I'd be crazy to keep all this right now, and maybe I don't ever need it. So there's a shedding process that struggle and pain tend to bring about. And one of the fun things I like to teach students in entrepreneurship, especially missional business, is, think back to your pain stories. That might be where your greatest passion will come from. So your pain stories are probably going to become your passion stories. So don't run from those. And that's really uncomfortable for most of us, especially students that don't want to go back and deal with those things. But, passion is suffering love. And usually if you've suffered through something, you're willing to suffer on behalf of somebody, on behalf of something or somebody else. And so we have to embrace that pain. And again, that's coming from a 4 on the Enneagram. So I may have a little bit different perspective on that. But I do believe that pain and that struggle can be very good for us at times, even though it's not fun.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I've never heard somebody describe passion that way, but it makes so much sense. I think you've done something really unique. This is a bit of a different topic, but I think you've done something really unique. I love the trifecta of what you've created. We've got the global social issue here. We've got a local one. I've got to help people become entrepreneurs and understand how to run social ventures. And I creating community. You've got so many cool things that you're hitting with your business, which is so cool. I love multiple social issues being addressed. Where do you start? What advice do you have for people who have these passions but don't have experience, just like you didn't have experience in coffee? What do you have a process for how people can take an idea and turn it into reality?
Yeah, I think business model canvases are great. I really like the lean business model canvas because it helps you start with limited resources. And that's where we all usually are. So I teach a method of entrepreneurship here that is really popular now. It's the lean methodology, really popularized in the last 10 years by Steve Blank and Eric Ries. And I'd highly recommend some of their materials, their books. Ash Maria's Running Lean book is great, but I think process-wise, it's really helpful to start by getting your thoughts. You have a lot of thoughts swirling around in your head, trying to start to get them into a canvas of some sort. And where I like to start, before I get into a business model canvas, I've actually developed a canvas that I use with my students that actually does start with that pain story. It's this process of moving from your desires to your design. So how do you move from your desire may have come out of, your passion may have come out of a pain story. So go with that. That's a great place to start because again, businesses are solving problems. You might be the best at solving a problem that you've experienced. Like in my example, the reason I was so passionate about creating space for people was because I'd been pushed out of a space. And thinking back further than that, when my father's job took us from city to city, when I was in middle school and high school, I was that lonely kid walking into a lunchroom, not knowing where to sit, not knowing who my community was. And so some of those pain stories cause you to have the real passion for the idea. So to me, you have to start there. You have to go with that. But at some point, you have to do something with it to move it toward a reality. And so what a lean business model canvas does is helps you to start to go, okay, what problem am I trying to solve in the world, not just as a social entrepreneur, but what business problem am I trying to solve and who has that problem? So beginning to segment your market. And so even today in an entrepreneurship class, I was teaching students how to think about on a business model canvas, what problems are you trying to solve and who has it?
What is canvas for those who don't know what canvas means?
So a canvas is just a process, and in the most organic way to describe it, it's just a one-page piece of paper with boxes on it, and it's going to take you. I described it this morning even to my students. It's almost like a hybrid of if you were building a model car, and you're following instructions. It's not quite that complicated, but on the other end, it's like connecting the dots. It's like saying I have this, this, and this. Then I'm going to start to connect it, and then at some point, I'm going to see a picture emerge. So it's somewhere between connecting the dots, as simple as that, and maybe the more complexity of building a model car or airplane, somewhere in between. And so you're starting to build your idea. And to me, one of the best ways to do that is to get it onto paper on some form of a canvas. Highly recommend the lean business model canvas. And then from there, you start to walk through like, how am I going to create revenue streams? What's it going to cost me to do this? These are just simple ways to start. And then starting to work on your solution. And in that process, you start talking to real potential customers and say, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? And you start to test your market a little bit. And so that's a great place to start. And in the meantime, you're building a team, people that are good at things that you're not great at. I also think that sometimes we're really quick to jump into something without seeking a little bit of real world experience. I'll admit, like, I didn't have coffee experience and I wanted to start a coffee house. I didn't go work at Starbucks, but I did spend a lot of time in Starbucks first for a good year. I watched and looked and observed everything I could. And Chris, my co-founder, he just would go in and would count like how many transactions were happening in an hour. So we could get a feel for like, if we're going to make projections, let's just watch how many transactions is Starbucks doing over the last hour. Who's coming in? Who's buying coffee? So you have to be a really good observer and you have to watch. But I would say, even better than that is go work in the industry that you want to engage in. I mean, I would have benefited tremendously if I'd gone and actually worked for Starbucks for a year. Or when it comes to a social problem you're trying to solve, like get up close to it as close as you can and try to look it in the eye as well. So I would say try to get some experience in the field, the business field and the social field that you're trying to create a solution for.
I love it. I worked for free for some guys for 9 months, and in exchange, I became a multimillionaire 3 years later. There's no way I would have been successful at all if I had just gone out and learned all the mistakes that I ended up learning around them. They saved me years of pain. And so I highly recommend exactly what he's saying. That is huge, huge, huge. So when you're meeting an entrepreneur, you're running them through the lean business canvas. We can Google that, right?
Yep. And there's a great resource called Lean Stack that lets you get a free account and play with your own canvases and build them all out. So that's a fun resource.
Ooh, I love that. We will link that in here. So you have them start with that. Then what's next?
Well, so it starts to get a lot more nuanced and complex. So unfortunately, you can't do it all on one page, right? So you have to build that, but then you're going to start to test that idea. So it's like building, the way we explain it to students is you're really forming a hypothesis. It's like a science project, really. Your lean canvas is your hypothesis. Your hypothesis in the sense that you're always having to speculate in the beginning. Am I really solving a problem for a customer? I might assume that people in Nashville, for example, want in 2012 third wave coffee. I might be assuming that people here actually think there's a need for third wave specialty coffee. But until I actually talk to people, I could be wrong in that assumption. People might say, we already have great third wave coffee. We don't need another coffee shop to do that. I might assume that, that people want large spaces, gathering spaces to enjoy their coffee. But until I go talk to people, how am I going to know that? So you want to listen to customers. So developing like customer interviews for customer development is really important. And so what we recommend in the process is, yes, put your idea on a canvas, but that canvas, the reason it's only on one page is because it needs to be agile. It needs to be able to iterate and change. You're not building your final solution. You're building it in a way, I like to think of it like, I don't know if you ever had one of those spin copters when you were a kid. It's like you just, like you might've gotten a cereal box and you spin it, trying to get enough traction to get off the ground. It's kind of like that. You're just trying to almost like spin your canvas to get it to lift up and get enough traction to rise up off the ground. And the way you spin it is by build, measure, and learn. So you're building a hypothesis, you're measuring it, and then you're learning from it. And a lot of that comes through trial and error, through failure, and repeating it over and over and over again. And again, a better word than repeat is just iterate. It's kind of a buzzword, but it's really what you're doing. You're learning through an iterative process. And that's kind of the hard work. It's a reason a lot of people don't necessarily engage entrepreneurship is because it requires failure. You have to fail in that first phase in order to learn. If you if you had $1 million to start your business, you probably would be at a disadvantage because you wouldn't embrace the failure. You just go spend $1 million on your, or $500,000 on your prototype, and then you'd start building it too quickly. That might be the worst thing that would happen to you. The best entrepreneurs actually start oftentimes very lean with very limited resources, and are going to build from there. And that's what makes your product actually work, because you have to get in the trenches and listen to people and test it on the market and then iterate it. And I think that's the best way to do entrepreneurship. Again, how does it become real? It's through the struggle. The struggle is what makes it become reality.
Why is it worth it, in your opinion?
Well, as far as social entrepreneurship is concerned, it's worth it because it has so many points of impact. I mean, we talked about a few of them, like, profit creation to fund water wells, space creation to love people. And I didn't even tell you, I could tell you all kinds of stories about people that have walked into our storage on the verge of suicide, or who had just given up on life, and we've been able to meet them where they were, love them toward Jesus. So space creation, but there's a whole nother world. So why it's worth it is because business opens up opportunity, obviously to create profit and to create space, but we're talking about opportunity in supply chain. So I haven't even mentioned the fact that, I mean, we can work with a farmer we have a new direct trade relationship in Costa Rica. We have one in Honduras. You can be blessing the lives of farmers in other countries, and directly negotiating a direct trade relationship with them, being a blessing to them. Your staff, you can be a blessing to your staff. So you're creating relationships that are meaningful. So like, there's just no shortage of reasons why, but if you are purposeful in what you're doing, you open up all those doors of possibility. And so it is so worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it in every way.
Oh, love that. I completely and totally agree. And I've found, you kind of have to baby step all the new initiatives you can add on over time so you don't sink your ship. But, kindness is free. Kindness is free. Empowering people is free. Helping grow people is free. And being intentional is sometimes free. Depends on how intentional you are and with your products and all that. So I love, love, love what you're saying. I want to ask you two more questions. Number one, what are the top things that you see people get wrong?
Well, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm borrowing this a little bit from Ash Maurya, who I heard say this, so give credit to him. But I think entrepreneurs sometimes get wrecked by their idea. They have this idea that they think is going to change the world, and they almost think that at that point, like, there's no going back. Like, I have this idea and I have to do it. And so sometimes we get so infatuated with an idea that we have that we don't allow it to adapt and to learn. And so I like to tell aspiring entrepreneurs you want to hold your vision tightly, but you want to hold your idea somewhat loosely in that first phase. So yeah, cast a bold vision for changing the world in some way. Like, if you want to go and address the water crisis, hold firm to that vision, but know that your idea, like in my case for a coffee house, that idea might have to iterate. I mean, that might not be something you want to hold too firmly to as far as the method that you're going to do it. So you have to be agile, and you have to realize that this is a process. So I think it's important it takes some humility to say, I might think this is a good idea, but I'm gonna do a lot of listening to see if other people would think it's a good idea. And the other thing, even if they think it's a good idea, would they pay money for it? I mean, is it a product that is gonna
Oh, thank you for the
achieve, like,
encouragement, but will you actually buy it? Yeah.
yeah, so if you don't have a product market fit, who cares if it's a good idea, right? I mean, the idea has to disrupt the market in some way. So I would just say, hold firmly to your vision, but hold loosely, at least in the beginning, to your idea. That's why we call it a minimum viable product. Like, it needs to be viable. It needs to be a product or a service, but it's minimum in the sense that it's just enough to get out onto the market, test it, and iterate it. Like, I mean, for example, this was a lesson learned the wrong way. When we started, we had people would walk in, we had like 30 options of coffee. It was just really kind of foolish. People walked in and they're overwhelmed by the menu, going like, I have no idea. Like, what do you recommend? And then we started to realize, keep it simple. Like, give people a few options here. And so I think the other thing is that we try to get almost overly complex. Sometimes simplicity really is best.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes just getting as simple as you can and communicating in as simple terms as you can to your potential customers and hopefully your actual customers is so important. Communication is key. You know, you want to let them know what it is that you stand for and what you're about. In social enterprise, I think there's a fine line in telling the customer what you're about and what you do without being too pushy. I like for our customers to discover that. Like I like for a customer to look up on the wall and look at a picture of people drinking clean water somewhere, and then to look at their mug and go, the well, and they look up back up again and they start to like, it's like they discover it for themselves.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I think something too to think of in that phase is like it's this discovery process. You're inviting your customer into the story of what you're doing. So you don't want to be so ambitious that you're pushing it on them and that you're saying, I want you to choose our coffee house because you feel guilty because of that picture on the wall. What you have to do, some of the best advice I give to entrepreneurs, you've got to create a great product. I mean, just like what you've done, Britnie, you have to create great products and services that are truly going to stand out in the market and not depend on compassion dollars. Like you don't want people to buy your product because they feel sorry for you. That's a terrible way to do social entrepreneurship.
So we actually call it excellence and impact
Right.
because you lead
And
with being the best and then you find out that we're impactful as well, but it's excellence first. I don't want,
yes.
the crappy house, but it's compassion dollars exactly like you said. So you've got to lead with being great.
And if you do, the mission will end up taking care of itself. I mean, you're going to cast the vision for what you're going to go do. So you need to be firm in that. But the dollars for that and the impact, if you focus on great products and services, then you're going to have dollars to accomplish your mission. If you don't, and I think a lot of social entrepreneurs don't, if you get so obsessed only with the mission and you forget the importance of the product, you're not going to be doing this in 5 years. You're going to be out of business because you didn't balance your focus. And so in business as mission, we like to say fully, it's real business and real mission. It's not one at the expense of the other. So develop great products and services, sustainable business models, and then the same thing with your mission. And I tell you, one reason this is so stinking hard as far as social entrepreneurship and most people don't do it is because starting a business is hard enough. I mean, you're trying to solve a problem. Like, how do I create a product and become sustainable? So that's like a layer, right? Think of that as like that business model canvas. Well, then as a social entrepreneur, you come along and say, now I'm going to try to address a social cause or a social problem. I'm going to address that cause. And it's like there's another layer of complexity, and then you add another one. And so it's like you're trying to solve multiple problems at a time. And I would say that's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you have to decide going into this that this is going to require a lot of problem solving and a lot of you personally. It's going to demand a lot of your time and energy. And if you're not passionate about that from the beginning, it's going to be hard to keep doing in 2 years when the feel good wears off.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Oh my goodness. This is such profound wisdom. Last question for you, Rob. If you could give any piece of advice from any arena, go.
Well, so this is, I guess, getting into some of my theological roots, but I would say learn to see everything you do as spiritual. And that is when you're making great products, hopefully, and whatever you're doing, that's a spiritual moment. Like you don't have to disconnect that. Like, well, this is like my work life or my entrepreneur life.
Mm.
Embrace it all. I mean, I want my baristas when they make a cup of coffee to be thinking, I'm making a cup of coffee right now. That's spiritual because I'm stewarding a gift, a skill that I have right now. I'm stewarding it for God's glory, making a great product, serving it to a customer in another spiritual transaction in a sense, because I'm now customer service. I'm serving you something. And then, oh, by the way, the profit on that is going to go help to save lives. And so the spirituality that we've sometimes embraced is oftentimes like this kind of otherworldly spirituality. And I like to tell people who are even, especially going into business, see this as a spiritual missional endeavor as a social entrepreneur. You're not doing one thing over here on the side. Think holistically about both what you're doing and what the impact that you're making is going to be doing holistically. So to me, holism is one of the most important things. You don't have to disconnect all these things. It seems like you're spinning a lot of plates, but to me, the goal is to try to find the integrity, the integration of all of those things. That's going to help you to be sustainable in the long run, because it's going to be coming from a very deep place inside of you and going to flow out naturally. So again, maybe the best way I could say that would be to see it all as spiritual. And the only way for that to be sustainable is to connect to the source of spirituality, which is Jesus. And that's where I find the true life that flows into any life that I'm trying to offer others.
I love it. This was not a Christian official podcast. This was not a Christian official interview. I'm just interviewing an extremely successful business entrepreneur who is changing the world as a force for good in his life. And this is his story. And so you get to decide, listeners, what's right for you. And we're just interviewing. We're asking the right questions. We're finding out why life is worth living and how to make it worth living for so many more people. We're making sure we lead with purpose and mission and our one chance on earth. And so, Rob, I'm just so grateful for all of the wisdom that you shared today. I know that it's going to go on and on and on, and I'm grateful we can capture these kinds of moments and pieces of wisdom in our one chance on earth, and it can live on and on and on, even past us. So thank you so much for your time and your energy today. You are a freaking rock star. How can people learn more from you? Where can they find that information?
Well, by all means, would love for you to be a customer of the Well, not because you feel sorry for us, but if you love great coffee, come see us at the Well. You can check us out online at wellcoffeehouse.com. If you go to lipscomb.edu and want to learn more about our Center for Business as Mission, you can easily find us under our College of Business at Lipscomb's website. If you want to take a class or two, we'd be happy to help you get connected to a class on business as mission or social entrepreneurship. Even if that's just like just auditing a class or sitting in, we'd love to tell you more about that. We also, let me give a quick shout out. We're doing a Business as Mission conference coming up October 1st virtually. It's called BAM 323. And so you can sign up for that for just $50. You're going to hear some amazing speakers for the morning. It's a half day thing from 8:30 to noon. And again, it's called BAM 323. And I'd encourage you to search that out and to connect with us online on October 1st.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Be blessed. Go and be a force for good. Thank you for listening to the G-Force podcast. You can learn more at gforcemastermind.com or by following us on Instagram at gforcemastermind.